Broadcasting live from the Business Radio X studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for High Velocity Radio.
Lee Kantor here, another episode of High Velocity Radio, and this is going to be a good one. Today on the show, we have Suzanne Weller, and she is with Weller Collaboration. She is a leadership coach, a speaker, a change practitioner, and a podcaster. So excited to be talking to you today, Suzanne. Welcome.
Thank you, Lee. Great to be here.
Well, for folks who aren't familiar, can you share a little bit about Weller Collaboration? How are you serving folks?
Sure. I founded my business. It was a side hustle for me, which I took full time right around the time of the pandemic starting. So that has its own story and interest. And essentially what I like to do is I encourage people to lead with courage over comfort. And what I mean by that is that I do thought partnership, coaching, speaking, facilitation, consulting. It's really all about what are the things that get in our way every day and how can we as leaders, and as leaders, I don't necessarily see that as a title. It's really about how we show up every day. What are our behaviors? What are our thoughts? How we can be more courageous in how we do that. So that's really the goal of the work that we do, is challenging some of the limiting beliefs and behaviors that we experience every day to realize what's possible. So we have better work cultures, better communities, and just, happier existences overall.
So what was kind of the thinking when it came to naming the organization Weller Collaboration instead of Weller Consulting or, Weller Coaching or Weller, all the other things you do?
So much of what I do is ultimately co-creation and it really sits with collaboration. I mean, I like to say that, my three core values and themes throughout my work are courage, collaboration, and communication. And for me, it's so much about how do we work together? It's about partnership, and that takes place on many different levels. So collaboration is about, many people or two people, but more than one coming to the table and really working through issues, problems, situations together. And I liked that word, and I deliberately chose it because it was a matter of whether it's me or one of the consultants that is on staff for me, how do we truly collaborate and partner with our clients? It's not just a one-way street. We're not just advising them or consulting them. It's true partnership. And for me, collaboration goes even further into that. It's how do we get in the mix together and do it as true co-creation.
So what's kind of the issues or pains that your new clients are facing when they initially reach out to you?
A lot of my clients who reach out to me are struggling with adaptability overall. I mean, we're looking at a world where change is rampant, as we are all experiencing. Wait 5 minutes, something else is going to change. Not necessarily knowing what's going to come down the pike, having it significantly impact how they lead their business, their organization overall, and getting to a point where the way that they've done things isn't necessarily the way that they can continue to do things to realize success. So they're bringing me in to work with individuals or teams or people on my staff to really take them to what is next as they look ahead. So it's knowing that there's a challenge ahead, or maybe they're sitting in the middle of it. So I have a lot of leaders that I work with that are challenged to either communicate effectively to get buy-in and bring their people along. Sometimes I work with leaders who aren't getting to the next level in what they're capable of or what the organization knows they're capable of. How can we look at some of the patterns that they fall into that potentially get them caught up? To recognize, okay, how do we get more self-aware? How do we have a better idea of where we might be getting in our own way so we can move beyond that? And that's about some unlocking. It's hard. I mean, it's vulnerable because it takes some questioning and looking at what you do and starting to do things differently. So that's really where the courage comes in.
But what's kind of happening as boots on the ground in their organization? What are the clues or symptoms that, hey, something's amiss here, that we do need to get fresh eyes on this? Is there something tangibly that's occurring? Like, are we not being able to hire for roles, or are we having lots of turnover or sales down, or we lost a big client? Like, are there things that are happening that they can point to and go, okay, this is not normal. We need some help here.
Yes, all of the things that you talked about. So people are people looking at their looking at the broader teams, where's dissatisfaction happening? Where are people leaving the organization if they're not able to retain people, if they're not able to hire good people as well? But also looking at the future of an organization as change is coming. And, the future, they don't necessarily know what it's going to hold, but they want to make sure they have the right people on staff, and they want to make sure that they're prepared for what's next. So how do you look at your people to say, okay, our numbers aren't where they need to be, or we've hit a wall in some way, or we know that we're going to need to do things a little bit differently for a new project, maybe, a new technical implementation. Maybe it's also a reorganization of the company. So that's really when they bring us in. But we tend to come in where they know there's more that is possible. There's burnout. There's lack of performance. There's some sort of wall that they're hitting, or that they know that where they are is not going to take them to where they want to be. So we tend to come in where it's a bit messy, and we're not fixers, but we're really about coming in to say, okay, if you really want to move through this in a way that's going to serve you and serve your people and really serve your organization, these are the partners that you want to do it with, because a lot of people don't really spend time on the change. They think, okay, we'll just get the right people in place and we'll just move forward with what we're doing. Not everybody's equipped for that. And not everybody has the skill set to communicate well with each other, and to really bring what they need to the table, and to express what they're seeing that might not be working effectively. So it allows people to come to the table, to have that courage, to have the conversations, and to be talking about, okay, there has to be a better way of doing this, or maybe we know there is, but let's take some time to look at the ways that we're tripping up, or that we're holding each other back. So that can be teams that are stuck. It can be, leadership teams. I mean, I also work with a number of different leadership teams where we coach them, because they know, okay, we look ahead to what we want to do. We look at our 3-year strategic plan. What are we going to have to change to get to that point? And they see the challenges. They know that they're not having the conversations they need to be having. They know that there are opportunities that they're missing. I mean, your question around, maybe a client not coming through. There's a lot of uncertainty in many industries right now. So I think it's a humbling and a vulnerable experience for them to look at themselves individually and how they work together, to really do some investigation, to look at ways that they might want to change that up or need to change that up before it gets to a breaking point. So hopefully we come in before the breaking point. After the breaking point is a more difficult situation for anybody, as you know. You don't want to get to that point. So our goal is to help them to look ahead, to prepare for what that's going to be, and minimize what changes or what resistance, what problems might be on the road ahead.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying, because change is happening at such a pace and it's so disruptive, I can make a case for having coaching as just part of the rhythm of a year. We need to have fresh eyes to come in here, and let's just start having these conversations proactively rather than waiting until something happens. I'd like to talk about a little bit of something that's out there now and how you would kind of go about handling kind of how this would work in an organization. So AI is out there. Obviously, people are playing around with AI. People are using it in a variety of ways. But there are certain people out there that are like, I'm anti-AI. I think it's cheating, and, we don't want people, asking AI for something and then cutting and pasting the results and then they're done. Like there has to be some ways to implement it elegantly, effectively, and maximize the use of it, because it is such a powerful tool. How would you go about kind of having kind of an AI conversation with a client that was struggling with using it, to get the most out of it, rather than to be something that they're maybe a contingent that's afraid of or doesn't want or doesn't believe in it?
Yeah, great example. And we work with that almost consistently. So it is one of those things where a lot of organizations need to figure out how they use it and how they don't use it, to your point, right? I mean, because there's very differing opinions on it. There's security issues as well. So, and what we try to do is like, how do you come to the table to understand what is AI going to be for your organization? So we're doing a program right now with a group of leaders where the company is bringing in, they're establishing their AI guidelines, and they're creating some tools internally to use AI because they don't want people to just go out and use it on their own. I mean, like, people are going to be using it. And that is one of the struggles that we see, people that use it in their personal lives, but then aren't able to use it in their professional lives. So there's obviously some dissonance and just some challenge. But the organizations that I think right now are doing it the most intelligently are the ones that are looking at it to say, okay, this is not going away. How do we look at it to say, this is how we potentially use it? And these are the areas where, we don't feel this is safe. We don't feel that this works in the best interest of the business or of our people. And brings it in a way that it's a tool, like if it's, automation on certain things. So there's tasks and there's different processes, or there's ways that you can do it to automate and to create efficiencies. However, they are quite clear as far as what information, if you do go out and use, whatever tool you're using, ensure that you're not doing it on the company's computers. I mean, there's certain guidelines and restrictions and regulations that they're putting in place around confidentiality and whatnot. But I see it as, how do we have the conversations around just coming up with that decision? I mean, we talk to leaders about what's the strategy that you're going to be putting in place? How are you all as a leadership team making these decisions? What experts do you have at the table to help you to navigate that? And it's changing so quickly. I mean, to your point, just even like over the course of a year, it's crazy how fast a lot of this change happens. So even if you put in a strategy now, doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to stay the same in 6 months or even a year. So implementing those touch points with your team to come back and to say, how's this going? Is this working? Do we want to change this? That to me is where this is going to be important, because the speed at which it's changing, we're not going to be able to keep up with. We can't pretend it doesn't exist, but we can be smart in how we choose to engage with it or not, and see if something is working, if it's not. It's not going to go away. So in my mind, yes, there is a certain amount of it that I think is the idea of cheating, but it can make big savings for a lot of companies, depending on what kind of work you're looking at. So it's there. How do we use it for good? How do we use it to move us forward? There has to be some guidance and there has to be some guardrails around that.
But to your earlier point of kind of leading with courage over comfort, it takes a strong person, a confident person, to kind of raise their hand and, as they're learning about AI, for example, realizing pretty quickly that my position as is might be vulnerable. The better that our organization learns about what AI can and can't do. How do you kind of help them build a culture of confidence and courage when it comes to things like this that might be exposing some vulnerabilities for some folks?
Well, and I think it's them having the conversations about coming together. And exactly as you said, there's going to be differing viewpoints, and people get pretty passionate about this as well. But we need to come to the table to understand that we don't just have the right answer. I mean, and that's with, I think, everything in professional environments and most of the things in our relationships in the world in general. How do we come to a conversation to say, I don't necessarily have the right answer. Let's have a conversation and do what's in the best interest of our organization. That is hard because all of us need to understand that, maybe we're not the smartest person in the room. Maybe our answer isn't the perfect answer, but we need to be open to co-creation, as we talked about before. How do we create that strategy for what's in the best interest of the organization now, and do that collectively? And there will not always be agreement. And I always like to say, you don't have to be aligned to be in agreement. What are the things that you agree that, okay, maybe we disagree on, but we're committing to this being our plan for yay period of time. Let's come back in 6 months and see how it's working and iterate as we need to. But there's a certain amount of, people need to come and not think that everybody knows the answer and come up with those decisions. Because I'm coaching somebody right now who is a senior executive in data analytics, and they have very differing viewpoints on their executive leadership team about what they want to be doing and what they don't. But they've all agreed that this is something that is going to be a work in progress. We want this tool to be something that we adopt. We don't know exactly what it's going to be yet, but they're having regular conversations around where they're willing to take some risk and where they're not. And that to me is the most important thing, is how do you have those conversations consistently? Because just because it's something now, again, doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. How do you consistently have those conversations to better understand where you are and what you need and how the tool changes? It might change in 6 months and you say, okay, what we did before, that was helpful, but something now is different, something is better, or maybe it's too risky. But we tend to just make a decision and think this is how it's going to be forever. Things are changing too quickly for us to just put that, draw that line in the sand and assume that it's going to stay in that place. So that takes the courage, I think, to not always think you have the right answer, to be open to trying something different, but to also be diligent about coming back to the table and seeing how it's going and to reinvestigate, like as you're going through.
Yeah, I think it's such a challenging time for kind of senior leadership when especially they come to the realization, that they believe what you believe. I have to lead with courage over comfort. I have to kind of lean into this change. I can't just kind of triage my way through it. And then maybe they come to some realizations that maybe the culture of the organization isn't as they thought it was or they'd like it to be. And they realize that there isn't the trust there that allows them to kind of implement some of these things going forward until they kind of shore that up. And I'm sure that's where your coaching and your team of coaches can come in to really help everybody throughout the organizations kind of all kind of get in line here of what the goals are and the mission.
Well, and I think you said the right word, Lee, which is trust. I mean, it's how do we put trust in the tools right now? I mean, a lot of us can't. So but how do we put trust in each other? And I think one of the hardest things for us to do, I mean, as humans, but also as leaders, is to say that we don't know something. This is something where we really don't know. And I think we have to be comfortable with that. And that's hard. That takes courage to say, I don't know. Let's see what we can find out. And there is a certain amount of humility that we have to embrace as we go down that path, because there's so much unknown and it's scary. And we as humans want control, right? We want to know exactly what's happening. We want that control. But we have to come to the table and say, this is something new. We can't pretend that it's not there, but let's use it in a way that we can make it work for us, as opposed to waiting too long and then having it bite us in some way.
Right. And I think that as organizations grow, the leader's view of what the organization is might not be accurate anymore. Like it might have been at one point, but as it grows, it may not kind of have, the culture may not have trickled down all the way. And there could be gaps that they are just not aware of. They see it a certain way, and it isn't until a coach or some fresh eyes are on this that all of a sudden it becomes clear that, hey, this is really the problem.
Yes. And a lot of it is, we as leaders also, we know from a lot of research, from Brene Brown's research, the number one fear of leaders is to become irrelevant. So if we think about that, then this is a scary time, right? It's always a scary time, but now with AI, I think that just puts it in overdrive. So the idea of what isn't working, how are we comfortable in having those conversations without over-indexing at the same time and talking about it? Because there's so much fear about just not having conversations, not speaking things that we really want to. And sadly, we do that to protect ourselves, but then we just create these cultures that perpetuate, like not trusting each other, not speaking to things. And that's where change doesn't happen. So when we have the conversations, when we can get more comfortable in speaking to what it is, then at least we know it's there and it's on the table. We can work through it together. I see that happening more, but it's also scary now because a lot of people, layoffs and otherwise, people are afraid. People want stability and they don't necessarily want to rock the boat. But there's also a matter of how do we show up for work every day in what's best for ourselves and what's best for our teams and our larger organizations. Because as I said before, I think we need to be talking about these things now as opposed to waiting for it down the line and then regret that we didn't bring it up.
Yeah, like this is definitely one of those things where earlier is better. Even
Yes.
earlier messy is better than later perfect.
Yes, and I think that's the thing is that we're so allergic to mess, right? I mean, it's just like, oh, I'm not comfortable with that, and that's okay. But as long as we just acknowledge, like, okay, we're in it. There's a certain amount of it gets a little easier, or it gets a little bit. It takes us into a different place, and we know it takes our brains into a different place. We're able to be more creative and not so like tightening our grip and so anxious about what's going to come down the pike.
Yeah, and that is not the way to handle the change with a tight grip. I mean, you got to kind of go with the flow and let some chaos in because this is happening so fast. It's so interesting to be living at a time where change is happening so rapidly and at a rhythm that is much faster than history, than it has been in history. And you're getting to a world where, I mean, there were never kind of billion-dollar companies with 10 people. Like that was to be a billion-dollar company, you needed factories and hundreds if not thousands of people. And now a handful of people can be a billion-dollar company. It's just there's so much wealth, there's so much change happening so quickly with so few people, and especially few like regular classical employees. Like how many remote people are people managing nowadays, and to build trust amongst them when they have 4 other jobs they're doing for other people. Like it's a tough situation now for a lot of leaders.
It is a tough time, and that's the thing that I would also really anchor on in this conversation is, yes, AI can do certain tasks and it can replace certain jobs. The skills that it cannot replace are, what they call the soft skills. I'm not a fan.
Right.
Of that
I'm for
skills.
Human skills. These are human interaction. It can't do that.
Yes, and I like that you call it that. These are the things that we need now even more.
Right. That's
because
the
there's
key.
more reliance on machines. Yes.
That's how you differentiate, by being a human.
Yes.
Instead of a form.
So now it's even more important than it was before.
Right. And you need to have trust and collaboration and courage to have human to human interaction, which a lot of people don't even want to have.
No, and it's sad too because of, remote work is wonderful. And, the technology has given us so many tools, but at the same time, it has made us not as good at communicating, not as good as having conversations and reading each other and building connection. And that's the thing now that I like to see people, I'm not for all office work and I'm not necessarily for all remote work. I think you need to figure out what's going to happen, but we need to find ways to connect with each other regardless of how we're connecting. And we're not so good at that after the pandemic, right? I mean, I think all of us got worse over the past 5 years. Would you agree?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I remember when the pandemic was waning and they were the beginnings of trade shows and conferences, people were like so hungry for that kind of human to human interaction. And it spoke volumes in terms of how, as human beings, we need that in order to really kind of be our best selves. But it's easy to get into a comfort zone of, hey, I'm in my pajamas, I'm getting it done, I'm getting paid well, I can, live the life that I've always wanted, all out of my house, door dashing in lunch.
Yes. Yes. And I mean, to your point, like there are these large companies with fewer people and there are, remote first or remote only companies. I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing, but if that's how we're going to work, then we need to figure out ways that we can connect in meaningful ways when we're not in person.
Yeah, you better be proactively building that in because it's not going to happen by itself. I'll tell you that.
Yes. And that's the thing is that I respect companies and I respect individuals for wanting to find connection with each other in the ways that they've been doing it or the ways that they're learning. But it's just like everything else we've been talking about with AI and otherwise, it's all changing. We need to figure out ways to, bend towards the light, and the light's going to be in different places depending on what day it is, depending on what year it is. I feel like these are the times that we need to be looking at, well, maybe I could have done that a little bit differently. Maybe I want to experiment with this, getting more comfortable in trying it and reaching out and experimenting. And that's harder when you're on your own, right? I mean, like when you're remote. But what are ways that you can connect with people? How can you get curious? How can you just do it differently? That to me is it really comes down to challenging ourselves. The way that we've done things is not the way that we continue to do things. And if we are okay with playing around and experimenting, that can be the game changer. And it really does come down to just trying something different and not expecting. I mean, that's the other thing is like we think results, we have no patience. We think results are going to happen immediately. That is not the case when you're talking about these human skills. It takes time. And, the payoff will be massive, but you got to invest.
Right. And you have to have a culture of experimentation. You can't punish someone for doing an experiment that fails. That is not good mojo for your organization. That's not going to build the trust you desire over the long term.
Exactly. And I love that you brought it back to trust, because how do we build trust, not just connection, whether we're in the room with somebody in person or not?
Right. And the thing, I think you can get lazy when you're making everybody go back to the office. Those kind of serendipitous kind of interactions and collisions and popping into someone's office for a minute or standing over someone's shoulder or being in a meeting, those things happen a lot easier in person, and that's what some of the leaders are trying to force into a remote world. But if you don't have kind of those locations where everybody's at and you are remote, then you have to build that in. You have to be mindful and proactive and build that in, or else it's not going to happen by itself.
Yes, agreed. And I also believe that, I've seen a lot of people now going to various events where they're just getting out and meeting people, getting out of their comfort zone, even if they don't work with them, just to start practicing those skills. And I think that's vitally important, right? I mean, you don't have to go out and network. I know that a lot of people hate that term, but the idea of, there are a lot of people that still crave that in-person contact, especially if they're sitting behind a computer all day. So you can go out and engage in the world and meet people and build relationships. That will also help you cultivate your skill set. So then you are showing up differently when you're on your virtual calls with your colleagues.
Right. Well, Suzanne, it's been a joy chatting with you. Who is kind of that ideal client for you? Who's the ideal? Do you have an industry, a niche that you serve more than not, or is it kind of industry agnostic?
Industry agnostic. So, I mean, for us, it's really about, as I said, organizations or leaders that have gotten to a place where they want to do things differently, hopefully before they need to do things differently. But change is afoot. Either it's coming down the pike or they see it right now. How do they want to upskill their leaders and inspire them to do things differently for what's next for their organization? So, yeah, bringing us in for coaching, consulting, speaking, we would love to have a conversation with you.
Is that kind of the way that they get to know you is through kind of a speaking gig or assessment of some kind?
A lot of the time it's a speaking gig. I might do a workshop, or sometimes I'll coach one leader in an organization and then it goes more broadly than that. So, yeah.
And then your podcast, The Courage Effect, what is that about?
The Courage Effect is my mission is to spread courageous contagion. So I have interviews with people that are doing courageous things in their life, not just, the big heroic acts, like we think about courage, big heroic brave acts like, firefighters, et cetera. These are people that are just going out of their comfort zone, whether it's a small move or a bigger move, to hear those stories and really just to talk about what does courage look like for us now and how can we inspire each other to just be more courageous every day.
So if somebody wants to learn more about your firm, what's the website? What's the best way to connect?
It is wellercollaboration.com. All the information is there.
Well, Suzanne, thank you so much for sharing your story today. You're doing such important work, and we appreciate you.
Thank you. You too, Lee. I appreciate you.
All right. This is Lee Kantor. We'll see you all next time on High Velocity Radio.